Hey everyone, I just wanted to give you a quick description of this video you're about to watch. It's a brand new series that will feature real life experiences that suggest connection with some of the most popular urban legends. This series will feature stories that have been submitted by you, the subscribers, as well as other stories on the web that have been overlooked. As per usual, I will have to rewrite most of these stories for practical reasons such as typos, grammatical errors, and to fine-tune the general flow of the stories, but rest assured the core of the stories will never be altered from the original draft. So then, without further interruption, enjoy the video. July 11th, 1995. It was a particularly hot afternoon in a small town located somewhere central United States. I was 23 at the time and worked as a janitor in the only hospital in town in a 100-mile radius. The hospital is normally very slow for most of the year, but in the 3 years that I worked there, the summers were always very hectic. Vast nature surrounds the town, and it naturally attracted lots of visitors during the summer. The town's economy was heavily dependent on the tourism dollars during the summer and winter. I would say those two seasons were when the town folks made their money, and the rest of the seasons they would barely make ends meet. So on that insanely hot afternoon, we had a half a dozen people come in for heat stroke. Two of them were an elderly couple from the town, and this was an yearly occurrence because they refused to install air conditioners. The husband was the stubborn one, and the wife kind of just did what he said. The rest of the patients were visitors who underestimated the difficulty level of the local hiking trails. The locals would always warn them to take it easy, take enough water, wear a hat, and all that, but some of them just never listened. I was mopping the hallway that connects the lobby and the consulting room when I hear Dr. Morris shout in panic, "Fuck! Fuck! Fuck!" I'm only a few steps away from the room where he was tending to a patient, so I run in there to see if he's okay, only to jump out of there the second I set foot in the room. The stench in the room, and it's not even stench, it's hard to explain the smell because it's nothing like I've ever smelled before. It smells part rotten flesh, part alcohol, part fish, and the stink of piss you smell from gas station restrooms. But the most shocking thing is how disorienting I'm feeling after smelling whatever substance that was. I fall on my butt and shout out loud for help. Nurse Becky and Dr. Sheffield come to my aid, but Nurse Becky begins to backpedal as soon as she gets close to the room. She's a nice lady, and she isn't trying to be unhelpful. This smell would make anyone run the opposite direction. So what she's doing is basically a natural reaction to danger. I try to get up, but I just can't move my legs. But then I feel being dragged away from the room. I look up, and it's Dr. Sheffield, who had grabbed me from under my armpit and is now pulling me away from the scene as quickly as he can. Out in the lobby, lying on the floor, I could see Dr. Sheffield close the transparent glass door behind us and proceed to speak in the hospital intercom. "I want every staff members to close the doors in the rooms they are currently occupying and proceed to evacuate the premises through the windows. Please escort the patients with you and wait outside the building for further instructions." The hospital is a single-story building, and virtually every room has windows built in them. I don't know what the official protocol would be in that situation, but it was the right call under the circumstances. Even in a pressing situation, Dr. Sheffield had the mindset to think outside the box. He was a smart man, so smart that I couldn't understand why a man like that would work in such a small hospital in a remote town like this. Unfortunately though, although the idea was good, no one seems to be listening on the other side of the glass door. Minutes had already passed after the announcement, and we should be seeing people outside of the building near the entrance of the lobby, but no one showed up so far. I can feel the weight of concerns in the room. Nurse Becky and Linda, Dr. Sheffield and I, none of us know what we are dealing with here, but we all know we are knee-deep in crap. Dr. Sheffield walks toward me, then helps me sit up so I can rest my back against the reception desk. He then asks me,
Matt, do we have duct tapes in the lobby?
And I answer, there should be a couple in the bottom drawer at Becky's station. He walks to Becky's station and grabs the duct tape, then begins to apply them all around the outer edges of the door. When it's finished sealing the contaminants on the other side of the door as best as he can, he gathers the nurses near me and begins to speak.
Whatever is on the other side of that door, we've all been exposed to it, even you, Linda. I know you were in the lobby the whole time, but you were still exposed.
Linda begins to cry and Becky gives her a hug, doing her best to comfort her. Dr. Sheffield continues,
I don't want to alarm you more than is necessary, but I can't allow any of you to leave this building from this moment on. It's very possible that we'll all be okay. It may be that in low doses, that substance wouldn't have any irreversible effects. We're only trying to take precautions, so I don't want you imagining the worst because of it. Self-quarantine is the only responsible thing to do in this situation.
He then turns to me and gets on one knee to be at my level and says,
Matt, what did you see in there? I have to call this in, but I need to know some detail on how this got started.
I want to tell him something, but I barely know more than he does, so I say, I was mopping the hallway and I heard Dr. Morris scream. I barely set foot in the room when I initially got repulsed by the smell and in just seconds felt disoriented. By the time you came to get me, I could barely move my legs. I felt like my life had been sucked out of me. That's all I know. I smelled the stench and heard the scream. That's it. Upon hearing my answer, Dr. Sheffield puts his hand on my shoulder and just says,
Okay.
He then locks the two entrance doors in the lobby and proceeds to make a call to some place. He speaks many words that I can't comprehend, and for some reason, that scares the crap out of me. To the right, I see Linda has lost her wits, and Becky's trying her best to calm her down. Because of all the commotion, one thing that I've forgotten are my legs. They're still wobbly, and I can barely manage to drag them left and right. Even if somehow we get out of this alive, I'm beginning to worry if I'll ever walk again. Dr. Sheffield hangs up the phone, walks toward me, and says,
I'm sorry, Matt. The call to the CDC had to be made first. I'm gonna move you to the couch. Just relax and lean against me.
He then positions his arms underneath my armpits and bear hugs me face to face. He slowly drags me to the couch and sits me on it. He asks me if I'm comfortable and I tell him yes. He calls for both Nurse Becky and Linda. Now they're all near me. At this point, Dr. Sheffield began to speak to us, but I don't recall all the medical lingo he's used, so please keep in mind that I'm paraphrasing his words. I'm sure Becky and Linda understood him better, but you have to understand, I was a 23-year-old janitor at the time. Dr. Sheffield spoke.
This is what I can tell you so far. We have nothing in this hospital that could have caused what we saw in there. No medicine or chemical agents present in this building can make someone lose their motor function and or lose consciousness, at least not via air transmission. We have to assume that some type of chemical agent was brought in by one of our patients, possibly by the patient Dr. Morris was consulting. My suspicion is that most, if not all, of the out-of-towners that came into the hospital today are either the carriers of an infectious agent or they've all brought in something with them to cause this. There wasn't enough time for the air to circulate throughout all the rooms, but no one responded to my instructions on the intercom to evacuate the premise. We have to assume that separate events of the same type happened either simultaneously or maybe the first event triggered the rest. I can't be for sure. The degree of exposure seems to play a big role in the severity of the after effects. People with direct exposure couldn't even drag themselves out of the rooms. And Matt, you've lost nearly all motor functions in your lower extremities, and your upper isn't looking great either. Do not be alarmed yet. This could all be temporary effects to whatever agent or agents we've been exposed to. I've made the call to CDC, and they'll send their people out here within 2 hours. I can't tell you what to do other than your absolute responsibility to stay inside, but if I make a suggestion, do not call your families. Just being near the hospital could possibly expose them to the agent present in this building, and they may even try to get you out of here. That cannot happen, not until the CDC clears us. This is for your own good, your family, and everyone else out there. Now tell me, are any of you feeling sick, drowsy, weak, anything?
I can't see well, Doc, says Becky, clearly concerned but still composed. It wasn't this bad at first, but it's getting worse. It's like I've got a chapel veil over my face, like I'm looking through a thin curtain. Dr. Sheffield responds,
It looks like it's got the same effect on everyone. I'm also experiencing the same gradual vision impairment, and it's likely that the next onset of symptoms is deterioration of motor functions.
Then suddenly, we all got startled by the sound of the phone ringing. Doc answers the phone call, and we all wait anxiously. The call ends, Doc returns and says,
That was the sheriff to inform us. They've got a perimeter set up around the hospital. Our families have been informed of our situation, and we've been ordered to stay put inside the hospital. Anyone who tries to travel beyond the perimeter will be shot on sight, and the same applies to those who try to breach the perimeter from the outside.
It sounds bad, so I ask, Doc, how serious is this? Will they help us, or are they hoping we just die in this building? Dr. Sheffield looks at me and says,
It's standard protocol. Without knowing what they're dealing with here, it makes sense for them to scare us into staying put. Chances are the order came from way up the food chain, and...
Before the doc could finish what he was saying, we hear a door open from the opposite side of the now taped up glass door. It's Charlie, the local electrician. I had totally forgotten that he was working in the janitor closet to access some of the wires that passes through the next room. The poor bastard must have been stuck there all this time after he heard the announcement in the intercom. The janitor room is fairly large, about 10 by 10 in size, but it does not have a window, and the only way out of there is through the door facing the now contaminated hallway, and lastly, either go out through the back door or the front where we had taped it up. Barely a couple of seconds passes before Charlie hits the floor. He's still conscious, but just like me, he isn't able to put any kind of weight on his legs. The hallway must now be full of the contaminants, and he was probably feeling the effects already, slowly breathing it in the janitor closet as the air circulated. He can't speak, but I can see him trying to wave at us for help. Horrifying 30 seconds passes, and Charlie no longer moves. Is he dead, or is he just unconscious? We don't know. The sight of Charlie going down like that even shook up the doc. I can see the fear in his eyes. I've never seen anyone that scared shitless. Out of despair or shock, I don't know. But we don't speak another word for the next 20 minutes until Linda says, "If I'm dying today, then I at least want to say goodbye to my husband and children. I'm gonna call them right now." She goes to the reception desk to make the call, but after picking up the phone, she's got a dumbfounded look on her face and says, "There's a man on the other line, and he just told me we're not allowed to make phone calls. What does this mean, Dr. Sheffield?" Linda's acting hysterical, and this time, Becky isn't able to calm her down. Linda bolts toward the exit, and Dr. Sheffield nearly tackles her and shouts,
They will kill you if you go out there. There's only one way you'll see your kids again, and that's to follow every instruction that's given to us. Go out now, and not only will you get yourself killed, but you can possibly start an epidemic. Is that what you want, Linda?
Then suddenly, we hear the loudest and most painful scream ever coming from the contaminated area. I don't know if it's the sheer horror I feel right now that's making the scream sound like that, but it sounds more beast than man. The shock from the scream is still fresh in our minds when we hear multiple helicopter noises outside. Some heavy things are dropped on the ground from great heights, most likely from the choppers, and we hear many footsteps closing toward our general direction. The phone rings, Doc answers, and it tells us we've been ordered to stay put. There are now men outside wearing full hazmat suits, and they begin to place poles around the outer perimeter of the building. It takes no more than 20 minutes before we are covered in a layer of clear plastic. It's like they just built another structure on top of us, and I can make that conjecture by what I see through the front entrance and part of the ceiling, which is a large skylight. A few men in hazmat suits come in through the back door of the contaminated area, and pretty soon more men follow in carrying several high-tech looking caskets. I can only assume they are most likely some type of quarantine pods. Every infected patients are carried out in the high-tech pods, and a number of other men enter the lobby where we are present, and they escort us through a mock-up hallway made with the same material that's now covering the entire hospital. We are restrained on the beds, and everyone refuses to answer our questions. We wait for the next terrifying half an hour as the men in hazmat suits run tests on us, and they eventually take us to separate rooms. I'm left alone in some type of a quarantine tent for what feels like an eternity, until a woman in a hazmat suit comes in and says, "This is going to sting for a second. Stay still and you'll be fine." That's the last thing I remember from that day, because the next time I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed still restrained. I was inside a clear plastic tent-like structure, probably a quarantine measure. I could tell several days had passed by looking at my long nails. I had trimmed them the night before the happening. There was a small device with a button and a cord sticking out on one end, placed right next to my right hand. I press on it, and less than a minute later, a woman in a white lab coat enters my room. "Good morning, Mr. Silver. I'm Dr. Laura. Can you try to move your legs for me?" I try, but I can't, so I say to the woman, "I can't move them. Doctor, is this permanent?" And she says, "I wish I had more definitive answers for you, but what we're dealing with here is something completely new to us, something we've never seen before. It's too soon to declare what's permanent and what isn't." "What happened to my colleagues? Are they okay? And how long have I been out?" I ask a series of questions. "Your friends are fine. They are in isolation right now, and they'll stay there until we can clear them 100%. Dr. Laura asks more questions about my condition, and I answer her the best that I can. I'm a little spooked at being restrained, and not even my girlfriend having shown up at the hospital even once, but I have to assume these people are trying to help me. Dr. Laura's consultation lasts about 20 minutes, and before leaving the room she says, "Someone else will come in to see you shortly to help you plan for your future care, transition back to the outside world, and to answer whatever questions you might have. Get some rest for now. I'll be back to check on you later in the afternoon." The doctor steps out, and I begin to feel anxious of the isolation. I look out the window to remind myself that I still have a life out there, but the sight of the rather unusually sturdy window makes me feel even worse. The window frames are built in combination of metal and plastic, But most telling was the thickness of it. You can tell how thick the glass was by looking at the way the sunlight would come through it. I'm restrained on a bed inside a quarantine tent, which is inside a room that looks like it could withstand an atomic bomb detonation. I understand the severity of the situation I'm in, and people with far greater intelligence than I possess are taking this measure for a good reason. But still, the thought of me possibly being the biggest threat mankind has ever seen makes me feel more isolated from humanity than ever. It feels like another hour had passed when I see a man in a black suit come into my room. We say hello, he tells me his name is Derek Desmond, and he asks a few simple questions. He acts polite and friendly, but somehow it all seems fake. Nonetheless, we get into the meat of the conversation when he says, "I've got two options for you on the table, Mr. Silver. One is to sign this non-disclosure agreement, and you continue to get care and financial support from us until you are fully healed. Option number two will have you discharged as soon as you are cleared from quarantine, and you can continue living your life as you had. You don't have to make the decision now, but it's something that you'll want to think about for the next few days." I have a little over $2,000 in my bank account. In my condition, I couldn't go back to my old job, even if it was still for my taking. This isn't a set of options laid on the table. No, it's a demand for my silence. I've got my own set of questions, so I ask, what if I choose to not sign anything and just go out there and live? Will I have to pay you folks for the care that I'm receiving right now? What happens then? Desmond puts his fake smile and answers, "What happens?" Well, that's a vague question, but I think I can answer that. First, you won't be responsible for any of the services we provided for you so far, and until you're discharged. Secondly, you are free to not sign anything and do whatever you wish with your life. Mr. Silver, this is the United States of America. Whatever you think is happening here, it's not happening, and you've got nothing to worry about. The reason why we would prefer that you sign the non-disclosure is for the sole reason of convenience. As you can see, we've dealt with the problem at your hospital, and we've given you the care that you need. We've got this under control. But here's the thing. If you go out there and talk about this, then in the unlikely event that the media picks up on it, it would create civil unease for absolutely no reason. More practically speaking, it would cost our government millions to correct the false reports, exaggerated accounts, and such. The alternative is for you to sign the non-disclosure, and with the funds that we would have otherwise used for damage control, so to speak, we can help you with your continued care, and we can even pay you a monthly wage until you are fully healed and ready to pick up your life from where you left. Everyone wins, and that's the kind of solution to problems we always strive to accomplish. I was so worried about my legs, the money situation, and my uncertain future that I didn't even ask this guy who he works for. So I do, and he answers, "Mr. Silver, I can assure you I do work for the government. However, I am not at liberty to reveal to you, or to anyone else for that matter, the particular branch of government I'm affiliated with, and to whom I answer. They're not information I can disclose." I stop him for a second and ask, "Derek Desmond isn't your real name, is it?" And he answers, "I'm afraid not, but I'm here to help. We got you out of a real deadly situation. We've been taking care of you ever since, and now we are asking of you a little in return for the good faith we have shown you. We know your father hasn't been around since you were 5, and your mother passed away 4 years ago. You've got no relatives that you keep in touch with, and your girlfriend, the last time we checked on her, she was seen at a bar with another man, and they seemed very close. Mr. Silver, I want you to be selfish and just think about the offer on the table. At your old job, you are getting paid $8 an hour, and that's after 3 years of employment. As opposed to that, we are going to pay you $3,000 a month in allowance until you are fully healed and ready to assume responsibilities on your own. If you go out there right now on your own, how will you afford the medical care that you need? Who's going to look after you until you recover? Let's be honest, no one, but it doesn't have to be that way. We'll provide you with a caretaker around the clock. You'll get all the medical care and medicines at free of charge. To top things off, we'll even provide you with a nice house ready for you to move in. All you have to do is to sign that non-disclosure agreement. Predictably, I signed the agreement. I had no choice. It was either that or I may have survived a couple of months on my own with the $2,000 I had. Then what? I don't know how Mr. Desmond might have convinced the others to keep their mouths shut, but suffice to say, he knows what he's doing, and I'm fairly certain the others were also given choices that weren't really choices at all. It took another 3 weeks for them to clear me from quarantine, and I was finally joining the outside world. Although I was in a wheelchair, it was the first time I was leaving that small room I called a home for the past 1 month, so I was truly excited to be free for good. But the moment I was wheeled out of my room, I understood how serious of a situation I was involved in these past few weeks. Outside of the room, there was the longest hallway I had ever seen. It was all white, and there were dozens upon dozens of doors on each side of the corridor. The doors looked sturdy like bank bolts, and they all had thick small window on top, just like my room. We had barely moved a couple of yards when someone smashed his face against the small window on the door. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Charlie. It was fucking Charlie. I saw him for only a couple of seconds until someone else who was in the room with him pulled him away from the door, but I still managed to see his awfully red skin and those crazy red eyes on him. Poor Charlie never looked that bad, even when he was earning pittance working as an electrician in our small town. I still felt bad about my legs, but I gotta say, it pained me a lot less after seeing Charlie. I knew he was never coming out of that room. I was then driven to a neighborhood. It was real nice, not the kind of place I could have ever dreamt of affording. They pulled into a driveway of a single-story house and told me it would be my home until I was fully healed. Inside, they had already brought most of my stuff from my old house, and just like the outside, it was real clean and real nice. I was taken care of very well. At first, they take me to see a doctor every 3 days, to eventually it became weekly visits, then finally a monthly thing. The thing was though, 3 years in, my legs weren't getting any better. So I asked them if I could see a different doctor, and they allowed it. Little did I know the doctor, who's supposed to be a civilian, worked for the government as well. I accidentally found out about it when I saw someone who I wasn't supposed to see while I was waiting in the hospital lobby. My caretaker brought me into the hospital a week before my appointment because I was feeling ill that day. My doctor and Mr. Desmond had no idea I was sitting in the lobby, so I saw the little sneaky shit getting out of the consultation room. Both of them had the look of a fucking spouse getting caught in the act of cheating. 5 years in, I began to realize the entire neighborhood I was residing in was a fake. The people who lived in the neighborhood were people like me, then there were people under witness protection, and government employees whose wives and children had no idea they were living in a covered up town, if I had to give it a name. This was a massive undertaking, and it would have cost tens of millions of taxpayer money to keep it going. It's no wonder why people moved out all the time and new people showed up the next day like it's fucking magic. Never a for sale sign on the lawn or the realtor showing the houses. Nope, the houses just fucking sold themselves and people moved in right after the old owners had moved out. Perhaps it took me too long to realize what was going on with my good enough for janitor brain, but nonetheless, I was finally seeing things for what they really are. I was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer 9 months ago in 2015. Mr. Desmond was still my handler at the time, and technically he still is, but in any event, I asked him if I could spend whatever days I had left outside of the town, and he allowed it. He knew I could give two shits about my future now, so I could speak, but he knew even better that no one would take my story seriously. I had close to $700,000 in my bank account at the time because I had saved nearly all the government allowance from day one. If you are curious, my bank statement doesn't refer the payee as the government of the United States of America. It's actually some shell company from offshore that really doesn't exist. My doctor tells me I've got another 6 months to a year to live. It may not sound like a long time, but for me, being out in the real world makes those 6 months much more precious than spending a lifetime in my old fake town. I've been spending a whole lot of time outdoors, but I also do a lot of reading and watch a ton of YouTube videos. The latter is how I found your channel, and I'll continue enjoying your videos until God tells me it's time to come home. I want this to be known, I'm not doing an expose on our government. Call me an optimist or a fool, but when you consider everything that's happened, I really think I've been treated well. I don't have a family, at least not the ones I still keep in touch with, nor do I have someone that I could call a close friend. So think of this as my will. I'm leaving my story instead of an inheritance, but nonetheless, it gives me closure, if that makes any sense. I wait patiently and excitedly for my story to be featured on your channel. Thank you and best of luck to you in all your future endeavors, Dennis. Goodbye. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of this video, and please allow me to thank Mr. Silver for sending in his story. We already spoke on Skype and discussed quite a bit about your illness, so I will not go into that during this outro. I did, however, want to say that perhaps the reason why you were treated so well, as you put it, by ostensibly a covert organization run by the government wasn't for the sole reason of fairness. In my distrustful mind, the thought had occurred to me that they needed you. They needed to continue to monitor you and learn from your symptoms. And what better way would there be to continue monitoring an individual but by inviting the person to your control facility where it's staffed by your own people and you get to have full access of that said individual's entire life in your palm. It's only a theory, of course, but one that I feel that is more likely than looking at the situation and believing that things went down the way they went down out of fairness. I also wanted to mention that I decided to feature your story on this new series because it reminded me of one of the more popular urban legends out there about the toxic lady. It's hard to say that it's exactly the same thing because you are never able to verify the source of the contaminants, but I think you'll agree with me when I say they definitely have some similarities. You know, it kind of brings that saying to mind, where there is smoke, there is fire. Perhaps, just maybe, some urban legends are inspired by true life events. Good luck with everything, Mr. Silver, and I hope you'll have more fun than everyone combined in the world for the next 12 months. Take good care of yourself, my friend. Lastly, I would like to thank a couple of subscribers who have suggested I start a series on urban legends. One individual has suggested it a long time ago, but I just didn't have the time to get it done. And recently, another subscriber that goes by Metal Blitzkrieg had suggested it again, and that's how I was reminded of the original suggestion. I do apologize to the first subscriber who has suggested it for not remembering his or her handle. It's been quite a while, so I hope you can understand. this is pretty much the direction I plan to go with this series. You folks already know some of the more popular urban legends, and therefore it wouldn't make sense for me to rehash the old tale that we all know by now. So whenever I see a subscriber submitted story that looks to have a connection with an urban legend, then I will use that story for this series. I also plan to scour the web for such stories, for the exception of Reddit, which we all know most stories there are written by aspiring writers. Let me know in the comment section if you have any other suggestions or ideas. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay safe.